The thing about working wood your whole life is that you develop a feel for the grain of things, for where the stress lines run, where something's likely to split under pressure. I spent 41 years building furniture and restoring cabinets in a little shop on Prospect Street in Galena, Illinois, and the one lesson that trade gave me above all else wasn't about joinery or finish work, or how to read a plank of quarter-sawn oak. It was this: the things most likely to break on you are the ones you trusted without checking. My name is Emmett Calloway. I'm 67 years old, a widower of 6 years, a retired cabinet maker, and the father of a daughter I raised half by myself after my wife June started getting sick in the spring of 2015. I tell you my name at the start because by the end of this I want you to know exactly whose voice you've been hearing, and exactly who did what. I settled in Galena back in 1982, the same year I married June Calloway, née Barksdale, a woman who could tell the quality of a piece of furniture by the sound it made when you closed a drawer. She had that kind of ear. We rented a cramped apartment over a laundromat for 2 years, then scraped together enough for a down payment on a narrow commercial building on Prospect Street. 600 square feet of shop floor, a back room for finish work, and a small office that June turned into something almost livable with a second-hand rug and a lamp she found at an estate sale. I cut and fitted and sanded in that shop for 4 decades. June kept the books, handled the calls, and made sure I ate lunch. We raised our daughter Rita in this town. She grew up breathing sawdust and varnish fumes and complaining about both. She learned to parallel park on the alley behind the shop. She watched me rebuild a Federal-era secretary desk piece by piece over 6 months when she was 14, and I think she found it either deeply boring or quietly impressive. She never said which. What she did say, often and clearly, was that she was going to live somewhere larger. And she did. Columbus first, then back to the Midwest, Rockford, where she met and married Dwight Harmon, who sold commercial real estate development projects, and had that particular confidence of a man who had never once doubted that every quiet old thing in the world existed primarily to be converted into something newer and more profitable. Dwight wasn't a bad man. I want to be fair about that. He was attentive to Rita. He remembered my birthday. He made good money and didn't flaunt it in the way that grates. But there was something in the way he looked at my shop building every time they came to visit, a slow, appraising look, the kind you give a car you're considering buying, not rude, just calculating. I started noticing it about 3 years ago, right around the time Galena began pulling in serious development interest from buyers in Chicago and Milwaukee, looking for weekend and hospitality properties. Dwight would stand on the sidewalk in front of the shop and tilt his head slightly, the way a man does when he's already remodeling something in his mind. I noticed. A cabinet maker notices tolerances. I notice when something is off by even a hair. I just didn't say anything yet because I had already begun to do something far more useful than talking. What I hadn't told anyone, not Rita, not a single living soul except one, was that 2 years earlier I had made some quiet changes to a few pieces of paper, and those pieces of paper were about to change everything. June passed in February of 2018, pancreatic cancer. 7 months from diagnosis to the end, and every one of those months we spent at the house on Bench Street rather than in any hospital room, because that was what she wanted and what she asked for and what she deserved. Rita drove up from Rockford every other weekend. We sat with June in the sunroom she loved and let the quiet do what quiet does when words have already said everything they can. After June died, I did 2 things. The first I did openly. I transferred the Prospect Street building into a single-member limited liability company I had incorporated 6 months earlier, Callaway Woodcraft LLC. My accountant had suggested it for liability purposes. My attorney, a careful and unhurried woman named Constance Mather, 52 years old, a property and estate lawyer out of Galesburg, who had been practicing for 26 years and had a reputation for enjoying a well-constructed legal arrangement, the way other people enjoy a well-made piece of furniture, handled every document. The deed to the shop was transferred to the LLC. My personal name came off it entirely. The second thing I did quietly. 4 months after June's funeral, I drove north and west on a Tuesday with no plan and ended up in Carroll County, Illinois, on a county road that runs along the eastern shore of Lake Carroll. There was a parcel for sale, 9 acres, lakefront, a stand of old oaks running down to a small dock, a 2-bedroom cabin that needed work but had a stone foundation, and a screened porch that faced directly west over the water. I sat in my truck for a long time. I thought about June, who had always said she wanted to watch a lake sunset from somewhere quiet, and who had never quite gotten around to it. I bought it in September of 2018 for $220,000. June and I had saved carefully our whole lives. Same vehicles for years at a stretch, never carried a credit card balance, never financed anything we couldn't pay cash for if pressed. People in town used to tease that we lived like it was still 1975. Maybe we did. I put that lake property into an irrevocable trust I named the June Calloway Memorial Trust, with myself as lifetime beneficiary, and I had Constance handle every document through a separate filing, completely independent of the estate materials our family attorney had always managed. The one person I told was my oldest friend, Floyd Oakes, 69 years old, a retired Carroll County assessor I had known since we were both doing summer construction work in 1974. Floyd was the kind of man who understood that some things are told in confidence and some things are kept in silence, and who never once confused which was which. I asked him to keep it between us. He said, "All right." From Floyd, those two words were a sacred oath. He kept it for 6 years, never asked why. That kind of friendship is worth more than any piece of property you will ever hold a deed to. The call came on a Wednesday morning in early November, gray and cold the way northern Illinois gets when winter is done being polite. I was in the shop. I still kept a key, still went in a few mornings a week to work on personal pieces, when my phone buzzed on the workbench with Rita's name. I answered, expecting to talk about Thanksgiving. "Dad," she said, and there was a tone in it I recognized from when she was 16 and had already decided something before she asked permission for it. "Dwight and I have been talking about the shop building." I set down the spokeshave I was holding. "Go ahead. You're paying property taxes on a commercial space you're barely using. The market in Galena right now, there's real money there, Dad. Historic district, the tourism numbers, people coming up from Chicago every weekend. Dwight has a colleague, a broker named Hollis Vance out of Rockford, and he thinks a building like yours on Prospect Street could go for $550, maybe $580. I said, "You talked to a broker." A pause. "We just wanted numbers, so you'd have the full picture before we brought it to you." The full picture. My daughter had gotten a commercial appraisal on my building before she had asked me a single question about whether I wanted to sell it. "I'll call you back," I said, and I hung up before she could answer. I sat on the old stool in the back room, the one June used to sit on when she came in to eat lunch with me, and I let the feeling settle. Not angry yet. Hurt, the way you get hurt by something you should have seen coming but held out hope against anyway. 67 years old, and my only child had put a price tag on the building I had poured 4 decades of myself into without so much as asking how I felt about letting it go. But here is what I have learned late in a life spent working slowly and carefully. You stop reacting. You start responding instead on your own schedule. There is a world of difference between the two. I went home. I made a cup of decaf I didn't need. I sat at the kitchen table and thought for a long while. Then I called Constance Mather. 10 days later, Rita called again. This time her voice held no uncertainty, just the quiet finality of someone who believes the conversation is already over before it starts. "Dad, we're moving forward. Hollis is listing the building. Dwight's going to be the point of contact since he knows the process. You'll want to start clearing your personal tools out so they can stage it properly." I said, "Rita, which building do you think Hollis Vance is listing?" Silence. The particular kind of silence a person gives you when the question doesn't fit the conversation they thought they were having, but some part of them already senses it should. "What do you mean?" "The shop, Prospect Street." "All right," I said. "You go ahead with that. I'm not going to stop you." "Dad." "Go ahead, Rita. I'll talk to you soon." I hung up, let her sit with that a while. The listing went live on a Thursday. Floyd called me himself. He always called me Walt, on account of a confusion the first week we met in 1974 that had calcified into habit over 50 years. "Walt," he said, "that building just hit the commercial listings. Hollis Vance's name on it. Asking $565. How's it moving?" "Already got showings. Young couple from Milwaukee, hospitality background, looking to open a boutique inn on the historic corridor. They came through twice this week." "Let it run," I said. A pause on the line. "You're a cold man sometimes, Emmett Calloway." "I'm a careful man," I said. "There's a difference." What Rita and Dwight did not know, what they had never thought to verify, was that the deed to the Prospect Street building had not been in my personal name for 4 years. It was held by Callaway Woodcraft LLC, a single-member limited liability company of which I was the sole owner and the only person with authority to execute any transfer. Hollis Vance had either pulled an old property tax record and assumed the rest, or taken Dwight's word that everything was in order. Either way, he listed it. He scheduled the showings. He ran the whole thing. Within 5 weeks, he had a serious offer on the table. Grant and Phoebe Merritt. She had managed a boutique hotel in Milwaukee for 8 years. He had done renovation work on historic commercial properties across Wisconsin. Their offer came in at $540,000. Dwight called me himself, practically glowing. Emmett, we got an offer. Strong one, 540. We'll need you to sign the transfer paperwork, the LLC dissolution forms, the deed authorization. Hollis will walk you through it. It's really just a formality. Just a formality. Is it? I said. He recalibrated. You're the LLC member. Legally, the transfer runs through you, but that's just procedure. Dwight, do you remember what I said to Rita on that second call? I said I wasn't going to stop you. Yeah. I meant it. Call me when closing is scheduled. I drove down to Galesburg the Thursday before the closing to sit with Constance Mather in her office, which smelled of old paper and good coffee, and had a framed Winslow Homer print on the wall I had always liked without ever saying so. I laid the entire situation on her desk, the listing, the offer, both calls, the LLC structure, the deed history. She listened without taking a single note, which was how I knew she was listening for real. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. Emmett, she said slowly, they have listed a commercial property that cannot legally transfer without your authorization as the sole LLC member. That's correct. And a buyer is sitting at 540 waiting on a closing date. Hollis shook Dwight's hand. The Merritts are already planning their renovation. She was quiet a moment. So what do you want to do? I looked at the Homer print for a second. I want to let it run all the way to the closing table, I said. I want Dwight in his good jacket. I want Rita standing beside him thinking the hard part is already behind her. I want Hollis Vance to lay his folder out and uncap his pen. And then I want you to make one phone call. Constance reached for her legal pad for the first time. Tell me what you want that call to say. The closing was scheduled for a Tuesday at 10 in the morning at a title company 2 blocks from the shop, in a room with tall windows and the particular quiet of a space where people come to sign things that matter. Dwight had texted me the address, as though I hadn't been walking past that building for 3 decades, and confirmed my attendance twice over the weekend. I was there 15 minutes early with a cup of coffee. Dwight arrived at 5 to 10 in a gray blazer that fit too well for a man closing a deal on a building that wasn't his to sell. Rita came in behind him, hands clasped, doing the nervous room scan she had done since she was a girl. Grant and Phoebe Merritt were already seated, a little bright-eyed, the way young couples get when they can already picture what comes next. Hollis Vance sat at the head of the table with his folder open, pen uncapped. The title officer had his documents stacked and squared. Rita spotted me in the corner. Her shoulders dropped with relief. Dad, she crossed the room. Glad you're here. Wouldn't miss it, I said. We're good? We're good, sweetheart. She went back to her husband. I sipped my coffee. The title officer began his opening remarks. Hollis uncapped his pen fully. Phoebe leaned forward, ready, and then my phone buzzed on the table with a text from Constance. Ready when you are. I stood up. Every head in the room turned. I apologize, I said, calm as a Sunday morning. There's a call I need to take, my attorney. She needs to speak with someone in this room. I looked directly at Hollis Vance, specifically you. He blinked. Me? Dwight was halfway out of his chair. Emmett, what is this? Sit down, Dwight. Something in my voice landed with more weight than I'd planned, but he sat. I stepped into the hallway and called Constance. 30 seconds. Then I walked back in and handed my phone to Hollis Vance across the table. I watched the color leave his face, the slow, even way, like afternoon light going out of a room. He set his pen down. He said 2 words into the phone. I see. Then he handed the phone back to me and looked at his folder the way a man looks at something that has just stopped being what he thought it was. Mr. Merritt, Hollis said very quietly, this closing cannot proceed today. Grant Merritt's expression shifted. I'm sorry, what? There is a title issue. The property is held in an LLC, and the individual who is representing this transaction does not have authority to convey LLC assets. Phoebe Merritt put her hand on her husband's arm. Grant said evenly, we have been under contract for 6 weeks. We paid for inspections. We paid for a commercial appraisal. My wife already has the renovation drawings. I understand completely. Do you? Grant said, not loud, just flat. The tone of a man doing arithmetic he does not like. Because what I'm understanding is that you listed a building you apparently had no legal standing to list. Hollis opened his mouth, closed it. I almost felt for him, almost. Dwight hadn't moved from his chair. He was looking at the table with the expression of a man searching for a door in a room that doesn't have one. Rita sat beside him, hands in her lap, eyes fixed on something that wasn't there. Constance arrived at 10:17, having driven up from Galesburg. She shook my hand first, then set her briefcase on the table and laid two documents side by side with the deliberate precision of someone who has prepared very carefully for exactly this moment. "Good morning," she said, taking in the whole room. "My name is Constance Mather. I represent Mr. Calloway. I want to take a few minutes to walk through where things actually stand, because clarity will serve everyone better than confusion right now." She tapped the first document. "This is the Certificate of Organization for Calloway Woodcraft LLC, a single-member limited liability company incorporated in Illinois in 2016. The second is the recorded deed transfer conveying the Prospect Street property from Emmett T. Calloway as an individual to Calloway Woodcraft LLC, dated March of 2018, recorded with the Joe Daviess County Recorder's Office. Under Illinois law, LLC assets cannot be transferred without authorization from the member entitled to act on behalf of the company. That authorization was never given for this listing or for this transaction. The purchase agreement is unenforceable. This sale does not close today." The room went very still. Grant was already looking at his phone. "Our attorney is in Milwaukee," he said. "I'm calling her now." Constance gave him a nod. "That's exactly what I'd do. Mr. Merritt, your inspection costs, your appraisal fee, your travel and time expenses are all recoverable from the parties who entered this agreement without the authority to do so. Your attorney will advise you on the specifics." She clicked her briefcase shut, and that was that. Hollis left first. He shook no hands. He said one short sentence to the title officer about following up later in the week, and walked out with the gait of a man heading toward a conversation he had already been dreading on the drive over. The Merritts left a few minutes after. Grant stopped at the door and looked back. Not at Dwight, not at Hollis, at me. "I'm sorry this happened to you," he said. "You'll find a good building," I said. "Galena has others." He almost smiled, then they were gone. The title officer gathered his documents with the efficient quiet of someone who had watched transactions fall apart before and understood that lingering never helped. He was out in under 3 minutes. And then it was just us. Me, Constance, Rita, Dwight. Constance caught my eye. I gave her a small nod. She stepped into the hallway and pulled the door shut behind her, with the soft click of a woman who knows when a room needs to be private. Rita spoke first. "You let it go all the way here." Her voice was very quiet. "Yes. You could have told Dwight," told Hollis. "You could have stopped this any time." "I could have," I said. Dwight said, low and careful, "Why didn't you?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Because you needed to see it. Not hear me explain it over the phone. See it all the way to the end." I held his eyes, then Rita's. "You talked to a broker before you talked to me. You put your name on a listing for a building you had no authority over. You told your father-in-law to start clearing out a shop he'd worked in for 40 years. I paused. "What exactly did you think was going to happen, Dwight?" He didn't have an answer for that. "Sit down, Rita," I said. "Just final." She sat. I moved to the chair at the head of the table, not to stand over them, but to sit level because I was her father, not her judge. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. "The shop is still mine. The LLC is still mine. You're welcome there, both of you. That hasn't changed." Rita exhaled and her eyes went bright at the edges. "Dwight." I folded my hands on the table. "The Merritts have a legitimate claim. Constance puts their recoverable losses, inspections, appraisal, travel, legal fees, somewhere between $18,000 and $22,000. I watched his jaw tighten. "It's not catastrophic, but it's not nothing. And Dwight," I waited until he looked up. "You told someone at your firm about this deal before it closed, didn't you? Told them you'd finally have the capital for something you'd been planning." Something moved behind his eyes. "You already spent it in your head," I said, "before it was ever yours to spend." He said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. I turned to Rita, my daughter, my only child, holding herself together by a thread I could see from across the table. "I know you didn't build this plan from scratch," I said. "I know Dwight brought it to you half-built already and you went along because that's what you do when you love someone and trust their judgment and don't want to be the one who pumps the brakes. That's not the worst thing about you. It might even be one of the better things. But you're 40 years old. You knew something was wrong before any of this started. I heard it in your voice on that first call, the careful tone. And you went along anyway, that matters. I know, Dad, barely above a whisper, I know it does. Good, I said. Then what I'm about to tell you won't come as a complete surprise. I reached into my jacket pocket and set a single folded document on the table between us. I didn't open it, just let it sit there. I spent yesterday morning with Constance, I said. We made some adjustments. Rita's eyes came up slowly. The Prospect Street building stays in the LLC, that's unchanged, but I've updated the LLC's operating agreement. Any informal succession discussion that included your husband's name has been removed. Silence. And there is a second piece of property, I said. One that neither of you has ever heard of. I opened the document and slid it to the center of the table. 9 acres on Lake Carroll in Carroll County, a cabin, a dock, old oaks that run all the way down to the water, a screened porch that faces west and catches every sunset God ever set over that lake. I smoothed the paper flat. I bought it in the fall of 2018, 4 months after your mother passed. It's been held in the June Calloway Memorial Trust since the day I signed for it. I bought it because after June died, I needed something that was still entirely mine, something no one else had plans for, something she would have loved. Rita's hand came up to her mouth. I had the Lake Carroll parcel appraised last month, I continued. The private appraisal came in at $710,000. I let that number find its way into the room, let it settle. I had always intended for that property to come to you, to both of you, when the time was right, when it had been earned. I buttoned my jacket. The trust beneficiary has been updated. When I'm gone, the Lake Carroll property goes to the Illinois Land Conservation Foundation. They preserve natural shoreline and open habitat across the state. Floyd Oakes' daughter sits on their board. They'll take care of it the way it deserves. The air went out of the room slowly, the way it does when two people realize at the same moment that the thing they had been quietly circling, the thing that had them talking to brokers and signing listing agreements and calling their father with a deadline, was never going to belong to them. Not ever. Dwight stood and walked to the window. Rita didn't move. She stared at the document on the table with an expression I hadn't seen on her face since she was 17 and had to tell June and me something she already knew we weren't going to like hearing. Dad, her voice broke on the word. I wasn't hiding it to punish you, I said. I was protecting it. There is a difference. You rushed a timeline that was never yours to rush, and in doing that, you changed where everything was going. $710,000, Dwight said from the window. Flat, just the number. The sound of a man doing arithmetic he should have done before he ever shook Hollis Vance's hand. You were about to sell Prospect Street for $540, I said. After LLC dissolution costs, after everything, you were looking at well under $200,000 each. You walked away from $500,000 apiece to reach for $200. I hope Prospect Street was worth it. I let that sit, not to twist anything, just so it would be real to them, fully real the way a consequence needs to be before it means anything at all. You're still my daughter, I said to Rita. There is no deed on that. Nobody can list it or sell it or walk into a room and take it away from either of us. I looked at Dwight too, but trust has to be earned back, the same way anything worth having gets earned, slowly, carefully, without shortcuts. I stood. Rita said my name, quiet, cracked at the edges. I stopped at the door and turned back. We're sorry, Dad, she said, and she meant it for both of them. I could see Dwight's shoulders drop an inch at the window, his version of the same words, the only version he could manage just then. I know you are, I said, I know. Constance was waiting in the hallway, back against the wall, coat still on. How did it go? She asked. Like it needed to, I said. We walked out together into a November morning, cold and gray and very still. I sat in my truck for a few minutes before I turned the key. Then I drove north, up through the bluffs, past the county line, past the last of the turning oak leaves still holding on, up into Carroll County, and down the gravel drive that only Floyd and I had ever used. I parked, walked the path through the oaks, and sat on the dock in the late afternoon light, watching the lake go gold and then dark as the sun found the western tree line. June, I thought. You would have laughed first. You would have shaken your head and said I was far too deliberate for my own good. And then you would have sat right here beside me on this dock and watched this water with me, and neither of us would have needed to say anything more. I didn't have a drink to raise, just the cold, the light, the lake going quiet. This one's yours, I thought. It always was. The Merritts filed their claim the following month. The settlement came to just over $19,000. Dwight paid every cent of it himself, and from what Rita tells me, it put a real strain on things at home for a while. They are working through it, which is more than I expected, and about what he earned the chance to do. Rita calls most Sundays now. No angle to it, no agenda buried under the small talk. Just her voice and mine and 40 minutes of the kind of conversation we used to have before money got its hands on us. Hollis Vance had his broker's license reviewed by the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. I did not initiate that. The Merritts did. Some consequences find their way to a man's door without any help from anyone. Floyd drove up to Lake Carroll in early December, and we sat on the screen porch with our coats on and watched the last light go out over the water and didn't much of anything for long stretches at a time. That's the thing about a real friend and a piece of land you built your life around. They don't need many words between them, they just need to last. And the Prospect Street shop is still there, same as it has always been. I go in Tuesday and Thursday mornings and work on a set of kitchen cabinets for a woman in town who has been waiting on them longer than either of us would like to admit. The smell of fresh-cut wood, the sound of a hand plane running true along a good straight grain. Some things don't need to be sold. Some things don't need to be converted or developed or listed by a broker out of Rockford. Some things just need to last. And this one will.